Good evening. We continue these video devotions, and now video devotions on Genesis. And this is our fifth devotion in Genesis, and we come to Genesis chapter 5. Genesis chapter 5. You know, we've gone through Genesis chapter 1 and 2, creation, big picture creation, Genesis chapter 1 with certain rhythms, more detailed creation of Adam and Eve, Genesis chapter 2, Genesis 3, sin enters the world with Adam and Eve. Genesis chapter 4, the first murder. And as I said a few days ago, Genesis 4 through Genesis 11 really are curses and negative things. We come to Genesis 5. Genesis 5 is just the descendants of Adam. It's when we start getting into these long list of lineages and descendants and things like that some would say are kind of monotonous in the Bible, but we always find nuggets of truth and nuggets of importance during these list of lineages. So Genesis 5, let's go through this. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. So we see something that goes back to Genesis 1 and 2, that Adam and Eve were created in the image of God, and we are image bearers of God, which doesn't just mean appearance, but being spiritual as God is spirit, and many other things. He created them male and female, and he blessed them and named them man in the day when they were created. So he created the male and female. Remember, it takes male and female to reflect the image of God. And it says he made the male and female and blessed them and named them man, which literally means Adam. Adam means man in the day when they were created. Verse 3, when Adam had lived 130 years, he became the father of a son in his own likeness according to his image and named him Seth. By the way, there's no mention of Cain and Abel in this chapter. And that could be because they died and did not reach adulthood or did not reach maturity. It could be because of that. So this mentions Seth. Then the days of Adam after he became the father of Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Now, these are meant to be short devotions. They're not supposed to be sermons. They're not supposed to be long-term Bible studies. So I really don't want to get into these length of years. 800, and he lived another 800 years. So verse 5, the days Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. But just a few comments. There's certainly different views. Some people would say the years were different. I lean towards a young earth creation. I lean towards the view, by the young earth creation view, that before the flood, the world was different. The world was different before the flood. There was less radiation coming from the sun and many different things. I believe in the man is getting worse. Humanity is getting worse, not getting better. We're only living longer because of antibiotics and penicillin, which of course is a type of antibiotic, and many other things. We're getting worse. We're not getting better. Certainly we're having more cancer and more diseases now than ever. The world is getting worse, not getting better. And certainly, we're improving in some things, but not many other things. The other thing of that is, by the way, when you look at him living 930 years, in Genesis 3, sin entered the world. That's the consequence of sin is death. That's when disease started entering the world. From the biblical worldview, that's when diseases started entering the world. That's when bad things started happening to the world. Corruption, not just to humans, but to all the world. Romans, I believe it's chapter 8, says, all creation is yearning for redemption. It's not just humanity, all creation. So there weren't as many diseases in the world then. There weren't as many bad things in the world then, and harmful things, and even cataclysmic disasters and violent acts, certainly then, as they would have today. So those are some just short things to think about right there. We do have, by the way, though, after the flood, God said the days of humans will be, I believe it's actually Genesis 6, right before the flood, will be 120 years. And that is fulfilled at the end of the Pentateuch, the end of the Torah, with Moses' death at 120 years old. And people, for the most part, besides maybe a very few exceptions, have not lived beyond 120 since then. So, verse 6, Seth lived 105 years and became the father of Enosh. Then Seth lived 807 years after he became the father of Enosh, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. Enosh lived 90 years and became the father of Kenan. Then Enosh lived 815 years after he became the father of Kenan. He had other sons and daughters. By the way, notice that they're only pointing out specific people. They're not listing every name and every person here. Verse 11, so all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. Kenan lived 70 years and became the father of Mahalalel. Then Kenan lived 840 years after he became the father of Mahalalel and had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. By the way, these are the descendants of Seth. This is a godly line of Seth. The previous chapter was about the ungodly line of Cain. Verse 15, Mahalalel lived 65 years and became the father of Jared. Then Mahalalel lived 830 years after he became the father of Jared, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And by the way, notice the emphasis repeatedly. And he died, and he died, and he died. Sin is causing death, except for Enoch. And so God is saying, and God is saying repeatedly through here that this death is a consequence of the fall, a consequence of sin. Verse 18, Jared lived 162 years and became the father of Enoch. Then Jared lived 800 years after he became the father of Enoch, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Enoch lived, now this is Enoch lived 65 years and became the father of Methuselah. Then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Now notice verse 24. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He's one of a few people in the Bible, just Enoch and Elijah, that did not die. Methuselah lived 187 years and became the father of Lamech. Then Methuselah lived 782 years after he became the father of Lamech, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died, oldest man to ever live. Verse 28, Lamech lived 182 years and became the father of a son. Now he called his name Noah. Here's Noah, saying, This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands. Arise from the ground which the Lord has cursed. By the way, sometimes people would say that some of these names are showing they're looking forward to the Redeemer. And they're wondering if Noah in this one would be the Messiah that was prophesied way back in Genesis 3:15. This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands. Arise from the ground which the Lord has cursed. The Lord has cursed. And it's kind of prophetic with what will happen with the flood. Verse 30, Then Lamech lived 595 years after he became the father of Noah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Verse 32, Noah is 500 years old, and Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And that's the end of chapter 5. Chapter 6, we'll get into the corruption of mankind. And some very difficult verses there about the Nephilim in verse 4. In short, and I'll repeat this when I go through this, it seems as though when it talks about verse 4, when it says, The sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old and men of renown. It seems as though the corruption is that the ungodly line of Cain married the godly line of Seth and corrupted mankind. The ungodly line of Cain married the godly line of Seth and corrupted mankind. It's not a race of angels and demons marrying humans. It's likely not that. So we'll come back to chapter 6 tomorrow night, Thursday morning. Have a good night in the Lord, and God bless.